Hello everyone, today we're going to go over Chapter 2, Light as a Wave. So in Chapter 2, there's a total of 5 different lessons. So we'll start at Lesson 2.1, Investigating Different Light Sources. So before we start, I just want to go over the lesson brief. So in each lesson, there's an overview section that kind of goes over the purpose of the lesson, gives a little summary here that you can read, provides unit questions so you have an idea of like what exactly are we trying to address and answer. Below here there will also be some key concepts as you get to those concepts, and also some simulations in terms of digital tools that are used, in addition to some vocabulary that we've currently covered so far. And on the right side here, any projections in class that were used, in addition to any videos that were shown, will be shown here. And also, if you need to brush up on the vocabulary, the glossary is a very handy tool that'll explain what the words mean in both English and Spanish, and in additional language as needed right there. So first thing we're going to do is go to the warm-up. And in the warm-up for lesson 2.1, it wants you to open up the Lightwave sorting tool. So we'll do that. When you load up the sorting tool, it has 2 columns. One column says can cause skin cancer. Another one says cannot cause skin cancer. So what you need to do is you just need to put these items, whichever ones you think cause skin cancer, put it in the left column. Any sources of light that you think cannot cause skin cancer, put it in the right column. All you have to do is press hand in. When you press hand in, it'll then show up right below there. And then you can go to the next activity. Activity number 2 was a hands-on experiment. So first slide just tells you the definition of what emit is with an example of a picture here. So once you go to slide 2, you'll notice that there is a chart here that you have to fill out. So flashlight A was the white light, flashlight B was the UV light, and you're supposed to describe what you noticed in terms of any changes that did or did not occur. So for example, you could be like you saw a white spots, or maybe you observed a white-ish yellow circle, maybe observed a green white circle forming, okay? Or you could also be like you didn't observe any changes at all, okay? So once again, just write down what your observations were. Flashlight A, write down your observation flashlight B. The only thing you have to write here is same, or you're going to write down different. So if the effects were the exact same, you're going to write same. Otherwise, if they were different, as in you observe different changes occurring, you would then write different. Once you finish that, you will then press the hand in button at the bottom right hand corner of that screen. Moving on to the third activity. The third activity just wanted you to talk about the question, is all light the same? So you just discussed that in classroom. And then the fourth one is a homework activity. So in the homework, it wants you to go to Lightwave simulation, and it wants you to set the sunlight as on and drag certain objects on there and observe what the changes were. And then it wants you to do the same thing, except do it with a light bulb and observe any changes that occurred with the materials, and repeat this several times. So sunlight, check the changes on 2 of these 4 materials, then use a light bulb and see what happens in terms of changes with 2 of these 4 materials, and then record your data. So the simulation looks like this. Sunlight's already there. Put some objects on there and inspect the changes that occurred. You want to do this for 2 objects, and then switch to the light bulb, check the changes, and then do the same thing with the second one. Check the changes, and then submit your images in terms of screenshots here. And then it wants you to answer 2 questions. Do you agree with Jonathan's claim? Do you agree or disagree that light is always the same even when it's emitted by different light sources? So you'll be like, I agree or disagree that light is always the same, even when it is emitted by different light sources because, and then make sure you provide evidence. So either use, you should actually be using information evidence from the simulation to support your answer, observing specifically the effects sunlight had on materials versus the effects that light bulb had on the materials. And once you're done, press hand in and you're good to go with lesson 1. Alright, moving on to lesson 2.2, harvesting sunlight. So in harvesting sunlight, there are 4 activities. So the first activity is the warm-up. The warm-up asks you to review your original response to the previous question in the homework. All light is same whether it comes from sunlight, a light bulb, or anywhere else. Tell us whether you agree with the statement or whether you disagree with that statement. Okay, so choose either agree, disagree, or not sure here. And then at the very bottom, whichever one you picked. So if you picked agree, pick the statement that supports the fact that you agree with the statement. If you said disagree, pick the piece of evidence that supports your disagreement to that statement. Okay, and be aware you are allowed to pick more than one answer. So if you think it's just one answer, pick one. If you think it's two, it's two. The second activity required you to read the harvesting sunlight article. So you are able to access that from the Amplified Library when you click it right there. It'll open up a new page. You're able to highlight different parts of the text. You can add notes as needed. So if you just left click, hold drag, you are able to highlight the sections with different colors. You're also able to write down notes. So write notes here and press save. So you can also add notes there as needed as well. Okay. And yeah, just read through the article and just actively practice. If there's any questions you have, write questions down. If there's any sections that you thought was important, highlight it so you can come back to it later. And be aware that anything that's in blue, so the words that are in blue, you can click it once and it'll tell you the definition of that word in English and in Spanish. Moving on to the third one. So the third activity wants you to discuss your annotations and kind of look over what you have written down. So specifically what it wants to do is, after reading through it and you making your annotations, by the way, you can also make your annotations right here as well onto that page. Write down whether you were paying attention to your understanding and recording your thoughts and questions. Either never, almost never, sometimes, frequently, often, or all the time. Once you do that, make sure you press hand in and you're good to go. The fourth one for homework wants you to go to the light waves simulation. And at the light wave simulation, use the sunlight, turn it on, observe the types of light the sun emits, and then check the light bulb, see what kind of light sources that the light bulb emits. So when we go to light wave simulation, which is right here, in order to observe the types of light that it emits, you need to click on the beam before it hits the object. So if I click on this beam here, you'll notice the types of light that light bulb emits. Now if you switch it to sunlight, same thing. Click on the beam and it'll also show you the types of light that it emits right there on the screen. Alright, moving on to lesson 2.3, wave properties. So in wave properties, there are a total of 5 different activities listed here. The first one is the warm-up. The warm-up wants you to look at this picture from the Harvest Sunlight article. And then what it wants you to do is answer this question. How is the light from a grow bulb different from light from the sun? Use the diagram to explain your answer. So you'll know here, the grow bulb shows you the types of light that are listed right there. For the sunlight, it shows you the types of light that are inside the sunlight and it's listed right there. So use that information to answer the question. And once you finish that, press hand in and you're good to go with that part there. Moving on to activity number 2. So it wants you to reread the Harvesting Sunlight article. It wants you to answer several of these questions. So do plants absorb all types of light? Put yes or no. What is one type of light that can be used for photosynthesis? Make sure to pick the appropriate type of light and then submit that there. And then which type of light causes damage to plants? Once again, pick the appropriate type of light, and then once you finish all 3 questions, make sure to press hand in there. Okay, and you also have the article here as a resource, so you're able to read through the article on time to help you answer those questions. Moving on to number 3. Activity 3 is a sim. So in the simulation, it wants you to choose a custom light and press edit wave, and you need to adjust the amplitude and notice how the light wave changes, adjust the wavelength, and then see how the light waves changes as well. Okay, so you're trying to find a type of light that will cause the plant to photosynthesize, and your second partner will try to create a type of light that causes the plant to be damaged. So when we go to the light wave simulation, you're going to have to go to light source and click on custom. Alright, and then you click on edit wave, and once again it wants you to change the amplitude to see what kind of light is showing up. It'll tell you the type of light in the bottom left hand corner there, and then it wants you to change the wavelengths and then let us know what kind of changes are occurring to that there. Press confirm, see what's happening to the plant, inspect if it's having photosynthesis, or inspect if it's causing damage. Okay, and you're able to check that out right there. So using that information, changing amplitude or changing wavelength causes the light to change type. And what type of light did you make? It was X-ray. And then did the light you made cause photosynthesis or cause damage? Put that down there and then move on to the next slide. So on slide 2, just tells you the definition of what a wave is. So make sure you review that and remember that information. And then on slide 3, it tells you what the definition of light is. So once again, be sure to remember that definition. It'll be important in the future. Moving on to activity 4, it gives you a picture of what a wavelength is, and it shows you visually an example of it. And on slide 2, it asks you to describe the light emitted from light source 2. So we're looking at the diagram here. You'll notice that light source 1 caused warmth, and therefore it's now asking you from A, B, or C, which type of light would cause damage. So select either A, B, or C. The 5th and final activity in this section is reading why no one in space can hear you scream. So be sure to read the article. It's actually quite an interesting read. Once again, if you are preferring to have it read to you, you can always click on this audio icon and you can start listening to it instead. You can also do your highlighting and your annotating on this particular website here as well. You have 3 questions to answer. Why can't sound waves travel through space? So sound waves can't travel through space because ... What are things that sound waves can travel through? Sound waves can travel through ... And then, can light waves travel through space? Light waves can or cannot travel through space because ... Moving on to 2.4. So 2.4 has 4 activities. First one is the warm-up. In the warm-up, it has a picture of several different types of lights. It shows you which ones reach the surface and which ones do not reach the surface. And based off this diagram, you need to select which types of light reach Earth's surface. So once again, guys, you can select more than one answer, so select all the answer choices that are correct. For activity number 2, it wants you to investigate light's effect on genetic material. So it once again shows you the picture that you saw in the warm-up, and this time It wants you to use genetic material in the light wave simulation, and it wants you to set the source to laser, and it wants you to test several different types of lasers and see what kind of effect these lasers have on genetic material. So you're gonna go to this question. Question 1 asks you to check which types of light are absorbed by genetic material, and then it wants you to check which types of light cause damage to genetic material, and then it wants to check which types of light are not absorbed by genetic material, and then there's a series of questions it wants you to answer. Can UV light cause damage that leads to skin cancer? Can visible light cause damage to skin cancer? And it's going to ask you which types of light will cause it, which ones will not. And then once you finish that up, make sure to press hand in and you're good to go. In number 3, it wants you to look at these two claims. Light from the sun and light from a light bulb can cause skin cancer, and light from the sun can cause skin cancer, but light from a light bulb cannot. And then it wants you to look at this diagram here, where it shows you the types of light in sun, and it shows you the types of light in a light bulb. And now it wants you to select which claim do you agree with, 1 or 2, and then it wants you to select which one does your partner agree with, 1 or 2, and then give some evidence to support your thinking. Once you finish that up, make sure you press hand in and you're good to go with number 3. Moving on, number 4. So number 4, it wants you to read the article, What is Melanin? Read through the article. It's a good article to kind of read, to kind of wrap your head around these things. And once you have finished reading the article, it wants you to answer several questions. What did you find interesting in the article? What questions do you have about melanin? Once you finish those 2 things, press hand in. And last but certainly not least, we have lesson 2.5, analyzing evidence about melanin and UV light. In the warm-up, it wants you to open up the light wave simulation. It wants you to drag melanin, and it wants you to select the source of light to laser, and it wants you to select melanin and genetic material, and it wants you to change the type of things you're using. So use a slider to change the light to ultraviolet, turn on the light, turn show energy on, and observe what happens to the energy from UV light, inspect genetic material, remove the melanin, and repeat the test with only genetic material on platform 2. So what it wants you to do is that it wants you to switch this to UV light. Okay, so UV light, and it wants you to inspect what's happening here. Also make sure to turn on energy so you can see what kind of energy is being shown. Then remove this one and see what's happening to that one there as well. Okay. Once you get that information, write down what you observed when melanin was blocking the genetic material. Cool. All right, moving on to number 2. Number 2 wants you to look at several different diagrams. So student 1 looks at this picture. All right. How does melanin provide protection against skin cancer? Be sure to use the words absorb energy and light. And you need to fill in the blanks to kind of answer that. Make sure to use those 3 words, those vocabulary words. That's going to be very useful in answering that question. Slide 2 asks you to look at the picture. It shows you what's happening with UV light, melanin, skin cell, and it once again asks you to answer. Write an explanation of how this evidence helps answer the question. The question being, how does melanin provide protection against skin cancer? Use the diagram to help you with that answer. Okay, and by the way, melanin is represented as these orangish brownish colored circles, and it looks like the orange brown circles are in front of the UV light rays. Okay, so make sure to use that information, write down your answer there, use that information, and fill in that section there. Moving on to slide 3. So slide 3 has you reviewing the melanin article again, and then it wants you to read and annotate, then write an explanation of how this evidence helps answer the question. So once again, same question, but now using a different source of material in order to provide evidence. So the previous 2 were diagrams, and this one is now using the article. So once again, use a sentence starter. Why is it that melanin protects UV light? So in number 3, it gives you several graphs of information, and it wants you to compare the graphs. What does evidence show? how does this evidence help explain why skin cancer rate is higher in Australia? So what it wants you to do is add some annotations. So click on the plus sign to add an annotation, and then jot some notes down telling us what you notice here. By the way, the left graph shows you the amount of melanin inside the skin of Brazilians, and then the graph on the right shows the percentage of melanin inside the skin of Australians. So once again, try to add an annotation, try to make a comment about what you see or observe here, and type your annotations there, and then move on to the next one. So next one shows you ultraviolet light map. Once again, the more yellow the color is, the more UV light that's being exposed there. Once again, try to write a little annotation about Australia. Try to write a little annotation about the UV light in Brazil. Add some annotation by pressing that plus sign, drag it over there, and then write your notes and thoughts down there. And then once you finish that, you are then able to hand in that work. Number 4. Number 4 asks you the question, why is Australia's skin cancer rate so high? Once again, it wants you to look at these two claims here. There's something different about the sunlight in Australia, and more people in Australia have skin that's easily damaged by sunlight. What they want you to do is either agree with claim 2, agree with claim 3, or agree with both claims and tell us why. Use evidence that you just kind of observed to answer that question, and try to provide evidence based off what you have just seen from number 3. Moving on, number 5, the final activity. So all I want you to do is determine whether or not you understand the statements, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it yet. Write down your choices above, so explain a little bit, just be like, I learned it from this section, or like, the articles help me understand it, or like the simulations help you understand it. Just write down why it is that you've kind of absorbed this information. There are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions, so be sure to do that. 4 of them are asking you whether or not you understand it, and then the 5th one asks you if there's still any other questions that you might have. Once you finish typing your questions, press hand in, and you are done with this section.